we live in a world where we're fairly confident that things are the way we think they are. Houses are houses, trees are trees. We act on the basis of the knowledge that we acquire through our families and schools as we're growing up. In fact, we have to rely on that in order to relate to other people, which we do through language, through exchanging words, structured according to grammar and the system of signs that we inhabit. So this is the kind of medium through which we are exploring our existence. We think about our lives, we might write things about it, we communicate our hopes and fears to other people. That is to say, our experience is mediated through concepts. Concepts are tools for thinking, and they help us to link experiences from the past, future, our opinions about what's going on in the present moment, and we build up pictures. And this is our usual experience. This is what is normal for us. Buddhism is concerned not just with the human situation, though, it's concerned with the fate and liberation of all sentient beings, which includes people in other realms, in God realms of rarefied experience, in tormented realms of anguish and suffering, the animal realms, birds, fish, four-legged animals, and so on. Each of these beings has its own particular way of experience. That experience, from the Buddhist point of view, arises due to the ripening of tendencies and patterns that have been there in the past. And because we live each in the sort of jungle of our assumptions, cutting with our blunt machete a little clearing in the forest, we imagine that this small space is our field of operations, our world, where we're going to be and how we are. From the Buddhist point of view, this limited experience arises due to ignorance of what is actual. The actual is the fact that our mind is not a thing. And mind is an open sphere of awareness. That is to say, it is the inseparability of space and awareness. When you look for the mind itself, you can't find anything. You can look and see, is my mind big or small? Is it inside me? Is it outside me? If you keep looking and not projecting and assuming and regurgitating things you've learned in the past, but if you actually look, then you start to see, oh, my mind is not a thing. I am not a thing. And then we start to see identity is not something fixed. There isn't a personal substance in me out of which I manifest moment by moment, but I manifest out of the actual, the ungraspable openness of presence. And this manifestation occurs within the emergent clarity of each moment, with whatever situations are revealed to us. They arise and pass, arise and pass. And inside that, we are also in ceaseless movement and communication with the environment. Even if we're sitting quietly, unless we're in an artificial way focusing our attention, thoughts and feelings drift in and out. We hear sounds from outside, sensation arises in the body. Our outer manifestation is in a field of movement, of ceaseless occurrence. And this occurrence has no limit to it. That is to say, because our mind is fundamentally empty, it's not restricted, it's not defined by any particular formation. And so we can become like this, like that. And when we look back in our lives, we see, oh, we have been many, many, many thousands of people in just this one life. All the different ways we were when we were children, when we were adolescents, adults, and so on, at work, in relationships. In each situation, we have manifested according to circumstances. That is to say, we are an unfolding display of participative energy rather than some fixed egocentric entity. So this is the basic orientation in Dzogchen, that the actual is open and ungraspable and yet always present. But this is obscured for us or made unavailable for us due to our obsession with and reliance on the fabrications of our own imagining. We imagine that we are a separate individual. We imagine that we have certain qualities and that they truly define who we are. So we can have pride and we can have shame, we can feel confident, we can feel in retraction with a kind of anxiety or embarrassment due to the fact that I am someone, I am something. You looking at me are going to be judging me, liking me or not liking me, so I can have some confidence or lack of confidence. And this interaction then between what I take to be the other, that is to say you, and myself, can be quite a grinding kind of experience. How can I convince you that I have value? I don't know you. What would you like me to say? How should I behave? Once you start to construct your sense of yourself and you try to turn it into a commodity that you have to present to other people for their approval, everything becomes brought up to the surface and artificial. How can I ensure that you like me and won't harm me? The fact is, I can't. I don't know what's in your mind. You don't know what's in my mind. I don't know what's in my mind, because thoughts and feelings and memories and moods of connection or disconnection are constantly opening and closing like clouds moving in the sky. So the more we try to control our situation, to define our identity, we find ourselves limited into a self-referential construct of our hopes and fears. And maintaining this in a reasonably dynamic, responsive mood takes up a lot of energy. The years go by. We never quite arrive at a place where we're sure about how we should be. Each stage of life has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And as we move from childhood into adolescence, adolescence into young adulthood, then the middle years of life, you develop a growing confidence. Yes, I know how to be me. And then it's gone. And then it's gone. So when we examine our lives, we can see that the constructs that we have, and we spend so much time developing and building, inflected by our ideas of comparing and contrasting and how we position ourselves with others. All of this work leads to nothing because the past is gone, it's vanished. So from the Dharma point of view, we want to awaken from our immersion in the dream time of the imagined to what is simple and actual and here by itself. This is it, how it is. So in this new book, there are, as you said, there are 6 sections, and they each act as a way of relaxing our fixation on the knowability of ourselves and others. The first section or facet is concerned with one thing leads to another. That on the basis of seeing ourselves in a particular way, this leads us to behave towards others in a particular way. As I construe myself, as I define and make sense of myself, and as I define and make sense of you or my boss or my parents, I adapt myself. So from the Dharma point of view, by examining this linking, this dependent origination of identity, we come to see that it is a process of production. It's not that we're getting closer and closer to our authentic self. Rather, we're building sandcastles. In the waves of time are washing them away, and we build them up and they're washed away. So dependent origination allows us to see everything about us is relative. Our health, our financial status, whether we're seen as acceptable to other people, whether we have many friends or we lead an isolated life, these are all relational. They're not something that we can create and define by ourselves. So how I am able to manifest is a conversation with the field of occurrence. I'm not manifesting my own autonomous, internal, pre-established existence. I'm coming into formation. So the first section is designed to help us to see what I take myself to be, what I take other people to be, and what I take the culture, social arrangements I live in. All of these are arising due to causes and conditions. They have no internal truth to them, no predetermined existence. Everything is open to movement because it's actually patterns of energy. The second facet is concerned with increased transparency, that as we start to see the lack of true existence in any part of our experience, we see, oh, it's empty of self, empty of an inherent existence. That is to say, we have experiences, that's undeniable. We're here, we're somehow present. We have an embodied formation which is moving with the environment. But there is no substance to that. There is patterning of energy. And this emptiness of internal definition is the corollary, the parallel fact of dependent origination. I arise in relation with others because I have no fixed definition in myself. So I am dynamic and part of an emergent conversation. The third facet is concerned with encountering the other. And it's a translation of a text dealing with the arising of a tantric deity called Chakrasamvara, who manifested in order to deal with the wild energies that were starting to move around in the world. So in Tantra, which is concerned with transformation, its a secondary consideration is always about power. Power to shape things, to increase them, to pacify negative circumstances, to impress other people in a way that causes troubles to diminish, and if necessary, to strongly control circumstances. So the peaceful Buddhas engage in the world by pacification primarily and encouraging the growth of love, compassion, kindness, and so on. But when more negative forces in the world arise, then there needs to be a stronger presence of energy. So in order to protect oneself, one has to manifest a quality of presence that says, hey, back off, don't intrude. This is not about dominating other people, but it's about the nature of invasion, because there is no self. The self is an illusion. So from that point of view, you could think, oh, I'm hollow. And then you might then have a kind of depersonalization. Well, if I'm not me, then who am I? I'm just some kind of leaf floating in the wind. And then it's as if I can become a victim and everyone can control me. But the Buddha's teaching is saying it's not like that. We are energy, and by bringing up energy according to the circumstances of the situation, we can be very generous, we can be very gentle, we can be sweet and charming, we can be encouraging, inspiring, but we can also be firm, impenetrable, like a wall, and we can be quite intimidating as well. None of these is a definition of who we are. The more we see that life is truly like theater, that our manifestation is a vast array of roles or potential for manifestation, then this flexibility and creativity of relating to others becomes something quite easy and relaxed and playful. So in that way, when we see that other people are in fact habitual formations of energy, and we don't get frightened by thinking, oh my God, they're like that, they're always going to be like that, they don't like me, what shall I do? And you get a kind of anxious contraction when you relax and think, oh, this is a dynamic formation, and I can move in relation to this dynamic formation. So that's what the third facet is about. The next facet is concerned with the rise of the really wrathful Buddha, determined to put a stop to the confusion which has arisen. It's a translation of a traditional story, a very interesting story, a tragic story in the dramatical sense, about two young men who go to see a teacher to get some development in their life. They hope to get enlightened. One young man is the master and the other is his servant. The master is convinced that he hears what the teacher says and he can put it into practice. The master says, your mind is like the sky. Allow whatever arises to come and go without taking it seriously, without reifying it. The masterful young man hears this with the ear of his ego and uses the teaching as a way of supporting his narcissism. He thinks, oh, I'm free to do whatever I like. My mind is open. My creativity can go anywhere. And so he merges his potential with his habitual formations of anger and desire. And he starts to terrorize people, sexually controlling women, being violent towards men, and his gets increasingly worse. Whereas his servant, being a humble person, hears the teaching and sits with the openness of the mind, allowing the various thoughts and feelings to arise and pass. And as they do, he's not investing them with energy. He's not confirming them in their habitual seeming validity, because he's relaxed and open. And gradually the negative structures of his behavior thin out, and he becomes more simple, more fresh, more present, more alive. So these two, starting from the same point, receiving the same teaching, go in very different directions. And the young master eventually turns into this monstrous being who brings huge pain and suffering into the world, until eventually the Buddhas have to manifest a very wrathful form to control him. So it's a fascinating story full of religious symbolism, of transformation, and of how one can get so lost in a delusion that you can end up believing that you're the only one that sees the truth, and anyone who tries to reason with you is somehow stupid and doesn't understand. Of course, we see these patterns reflected in many of our political leaders of the present moment. The fifth facet has a focus on the female experience of Dharma. It focuses on a young Tibetan woman, a Machik Labdran, growing up in a village with parents wanting her to marry, and her desire to follow the path of Dharma, and how she overcame the obstacles that stood in the way and found a way to practice in the face of a lot of hostility and people being sure that they knew who she was, not wanting to hear that she could actually show herself to them. And this very interesting, beautiful, short autobiography is then followed by an outlining of several practices concerned with her, one being the translation of a text of the Chöd of how to engage in the diminution of the ego's central reference point by offering it up. So the more you go into the field of tantra, the more you're working with the absence of fixed identity in oneself, and therefore the possibility of taking on a wide range of alternative identities. If you're born with a male body, you can have as your main meditation practice being a goddess, because actually the manifestation of a male body is a karmic fixation. It's a patterning of energy. There is no essential maleness. It's simply habit formations, the way muscles develop and so on. It's an energetic formation. So through the meditation practice, you can experience many different kinds of identities. And then you really see directly for yourself, there is no fixed self. I am an open potential for participation and being with others. And as long as the motive is clearly love and compassion, kindness, the desire to help other people awaken, then the playful movement through these identities becomes very life-affirming for oneself and for others. In particular, the feminine energy manifests as a quality of undefendedness. Undefendedness means a kind of naked availability, not as a victim, not as somebody to be objectified, but of the constant possibility of dropping away projections. We are very aware in these present times of the projections that arise around race, around gender, around religion, that we feel when we know someone's sexuality, somehow we know something about them, and therefore can use a template to make sense of how they're likely to behave. Tantra is a means of dissolving that kind of obscuring false knowledge. Human beings and birds and frogs and dogs are essentially ungraspable. What you say about them, what you think you know about them, is simply looking in a mirror and seeing your own reflection. If we want to get close to the truth of the other, we have to empty ourselves of our assumptions, of our sense of ownership of the world, of our right to determine who other people are, and to become relaxed, open, simple, and receptive by receiving the direct experience of the energetic presence of the other. We find ourselves responding. And so that subject and object start to move together in an articulated co-emergence free of domination and control. This is the spontaneous, effortless, non-dual manifestation. So this is the function of the fifth aspect, in which there are a lot of details. This final sixth section is quite short. It's focused on just this: the exquisite simplicity of each moment in which we find ourselves as we are. For example, at the moment, I find myself leaning forward, looking at this computer screen in front of me, and my left hand is resting on my left thigh, and I'm slightly at an angle. Why I'm sitting like this, I don't know. It's just this. Then I think, oh, I'll sit up more straight. Then it's just this. It's always just this. However it is, whether we are confident or whether we are ashamed, it's just this. And then it's not this. It's something else, and something else, and something else. The emptiness of the mind, the openness, the unborn quality of the mind cannot be grasped and cannot be determined. This spaciousness is not an empty void with nothing at all. It's a plenum void. It's always full. Just as with the traditional example of the mirror, when you look in a mirror, you don't see the mirror, you see reflections. That's because the mirror is empty of its own self, but it's full of what it shows. Similarly, when you look to find yourself inside, you don't find some fixed little person inside you, some true essential truth. You find an openness, and this openness gives a space for emergence to all manner of postures, gestures, tones of voice, seriousness, playfulness, and so on. All the many, many possible movements that could be described in aesthetics or physiology, whatever. And because of this openness, and that as participation arises, it is always in the field which is already here. The emergent field displays itself moment by moment. However you turn your head up or down, left or right, you encounter the immediacy of the completion of this field of experience. Then here you are within this field of experience. You are a movement in the field of experience. So in the ocean, the waves keep moving and moving and moving, but they never exhaust the depth of the ocean, which remains more calm, more peaceful. It's the same with the mind. The energy of the mind is connective and interactive, but it doesn't show you the truth of the mind, which is calm, peaceful, and ungraspable. You can't grasp the gestures of your life because they're always changing. What you say, the words come out and then dissolve and gone. You stand up, you bend, you turn, you lift your knife and fork, whatever you're doing, for a moment, and then for a moment, and then for a moment. Each formation has no essence of its own, but arises as part of the conversation of existence. So this final facet in the book is concerned with the intrinsic integrity of openness, clarity, and spontaneous connectivity. And this is the simple, unartificial, unborn, free flow of our existence, available moment by moment, moment by moment, moment by moment. You never know what it's going to be. But that's not frightening when you see knowledge occurs after the fact. If you're present in the moment, you have more clarity because you're not trying to work out what is occurring. You are part of the emergence of the occurrence. And so you're fresh, you're on the beat, you're here. And life is moving and it's changing. You don't get lost because you're precisely here and here. We get lost by going into the labyrinths of the past, of the future, of our analytic interpretations, and so on. So traditionally, you could see these 6 sections of this book as covering different aspects of the Buddha's teaching. In fact, they collaborate together very helpfully because they approach the same issue from a different point of view. Namely, if there is no inherent existence in beings or in phenomena, in trees, in cars and houses, if everything is occurring in relation to other phenomena, then what does it mean to be how I am? Well, in a sense, when we phrase the question in that way, what does it mean to be how I am? We're already going off in a analytic or academic, rational way of thinking. The key thing is how I am. So again and again, the texts in this book are ways of returning us to the presence of how I am in this moment, just like this, and seeing, being present with the clarity of presence itself, so that we don't need conceptual elaboration. We don't need to approach life as a problem to be solved with worry and uncertainty and insecurities, instead of which we stay absolutely centered in this present moment. And then everything is to be found inside that. This is the great point, or the great bindu, which looks so small, but actually encompasses everything. So that's a brief introduction to how the book is. It was a lot of fun and hard work putting it together, but I hope it would be interesting and useful to at least some people. So I think now we want to see if there are any questions. In India, there are many descriptions of different kinds of sacred places. For example, there are the 8 great cemeteries, and they are found in India, but they also have parallel cemeteries in Nepal and in Tibet. In relation to the 24 places, these are linked to the spinal cord. So the basic presence of the dakinis is in the body. They are, in the tradition, it says that each pore of the body has many, many dakinis inside, and they inhabit the sections of the spine, but they also inhabit the heart and the blood. Now, the word dakini is translated into Tibetan as kandroma, which means moving in the sky. What is the sky? Is the empty, unborn mind. What is moving in the sky? Thoughts, feelings, sensations. So the 24 places internally for the body are a way of reminding us that the body is not a thing. It is a dynamic, interactive emergence, which of course modern ways of looking at medicine look at the same. They're seeing the flow of hormones, the flow of the blood. So many factors are clearly dynamic. Even the marrow in the body is seen to be doing a lot of important work. We see now that the bacteria in the bowel is doing a lot of work. The various nerves, the vagus nerve and so on, all these endless communication systems. The body is communication. In a similar way, the external 24 places are sites where different groups of potentially troublesome beings gathered together for their kind of group membership, and they created a particular kind of mood. So just as in our body, our heart has a different function from the liver and the kidneys, if you go on pilgrimage in India and you go to these sacred places, you can really feel in the air, in the vibration of the place, very different mood. Some places are rather terrifying, some are very relaxing, but that's also how we experience other people. On a visceral level, if we don't start with some kind of assumption, oh, may all beings be happy, I love everyone, if we don't delude ourselves in that way and you stay present energetically, you find different people impact you very differently. And this is the quality of these 24 places, that if you attend to the phenomena of the world, it is always it's always relational, communicative, contingent, and emergent. You find yourself being in different ways with different people in different places, and of course, differently according to the health of the different aspects of your body, including the balance of the elements. So Chakrasamvara, this deity, when he comes into the world, he has a function of regularizing the conflicted, disputatious energies of these different groups of beings, many of them quite concerned with egotism and dominance, so that as the energy is subdued or becomes quiescent, better communication can occur. And of course, we live in a time of great conflict between nations, politically, economically, and in terms of climate change, whether people will collaborate or not. So it's like, what is the unifying factor? You can't dominate and force people to do things, but you have to evoke a sense of the joy or the beauty or the sweetness of collaboration. And that's really what Chakrasamvara is doing. With the first aspect, Mahamudra, many of the texts on Dzogchen say how the mind is something to see directly. Some people call it Madhyamika, some people call it Mahamudra, some people call it Dzogchen. These are only names. The immediate actuality of the mind itself is not a concept. It doesn't rest on concepts, and it can't be found by using concepts. So from that point of view, Mahamudra is one pathway in, Dzogchen is another pathway in, but what you arrive at cannot be owned or claimed by any particular definition or system of evaluation. There are differences in that generally in Dzogchen there are more methods using energy explicitly than you usually get in the Mahamudra. The Mahamudra can be quite organized with different levels and stages that you have to go through. A lot of it depends very much on how the teacher is. Some teachers regard their students as a bunch of sheep, and they then have to act like some collie sheepdog running around and biting their ankles and getting them to do their nundro and follow all the stages of the path. Other teachers have more trust, or maybe they're more laissez-faire, but they feel you have to find your way, because your way, your unique, specific way, that is your authenticity. How will you become natural, intrinsic, simple if you make yourself artificial? A path with too much rules and directions and things to do brings about a subject-object alignment, which can be a kind of haze. It gives you the confidence of succeeding. I've gone from A to B to C to D, but who am I? The central question is always, who am I? And that's a very unforgiving territory. That's a territory that easily exposes if you're up to tricks, if you're playing games, if you're trying to cheat yourself. So this links to Advaita Vedanta. Whether you go back to the traditional formulations of Shankaracharya, or the many later interpretations and so on, or modern masters like Ramana Maharshi, the central concern is to use language in a self-deconstructive way, that you learn about the technical terms, but not to create and build castles in the air, but rather to, like a screwdriver, unfastening your reliance on concepts so that you can come to the simplest of inquiries, which is, who is this? Or who am I? We are present, we are alive, we're here, we look around, we hear things, we're not dead yet. So in that sense, there is a presence. But what is presence? If you tell yourself who you are, you cover your presence with an interpretation. You wrap it in something. So Dzogchen, Mahamudra, and Advaita are similar in their desire to move towards simplicity and nakedness. And for each of them, the shadow is that in order to explain the teachings, we tend to use a lot of words and a lot of concepts. And so the very means of trying to help other people to find themselves where they need to be can create a lot of unnecessary covering. So the teacher needs to learn how to teach in a way that helps the teaching to dissolve itself. And the student needs to find a way to study and listen and learn in a way that dissolves itself. Because the goal of the meditation is to meditate sky to sky. Our mind is like an open sky, and we encounter whatever is occurring as an open sky. And the same between the teacher and the student is two skies meeting. Of course, at first there are many, many clouds, but when we see the clouds are in the sky, they're not the enemy of the sky, then the clouds start to dissolve and there's much more openness and freshness. So I would say that the core function is to live in the sky, to be in the sky. So the mind is naked. like they say in the yogic tradition in India, in the Dasnami tradition, they say, Guru Devam Datam Digambaram Chitti Maha Sigandaram. The guru is like the deity, is the presence of the divine. And he is naked, not covered in any way. Whatever you say about the teacher is not the teacher, it's your interpretation of the teacher. Chitti Mahasigandaram, and this mind is bright and radiant, clarifying everything which occurs. So the guru is the deity who is not covered in concepts, who is not resting on anything, but is the radiant presence of awareness. So Mahamudra would agree with that, and Dzogchen would agree with that as well. I'm not myself very interested in this. I think science is useful for producing vaccines and airplanes that don't fall out of the sky. But as science as an explanation for spiritual people is probably unhelpful, because science tends to be reductive. It takes you back to, oh, this is due to your RNA or your DNA or a big bang, or it has to do with certain kinds of photons or basic elements. So science provides you with a lot of things to think about. I personally, due to my own bad karma, find I have a lot of things anyway to think about. I don't need extra thought injections every day. I'm like a fountain producing masses of thoughts. My issue is to find the space that allows the thoughts to come and go without grinding together and making trouble. So for someone like me, I'm not looking to science to explain very much. I just wanted to support the practical necessities of life. And I'm aware that one of the things that is, for me anyway, scary about science is the push between science and entrepreneurs. Now in most universities, now the science departments are all looking at how they can make money because they don't get enough government funding. And so they've got their business experts coming in to show them how to develop things without thinking about what the implications are. Many people are a little bit wary now about the new virus inoculations. Should I have the vaccine or not? How do I know it will be safe? How do I know what's inside? Maybe that's reasonable, maybe not. I've had the vaccine, I'm happy to have done that. But I don't see so many people worrying about their mobile phones. Mobile phones, digital apparatus works from a binary system of mathematics. Binary means clearly dualistic. So a dualistic structure gives rise to this little machine that controls so much of people's lives without people thinking of the implications of it. You use the machine, but the machine is directing you. You're not in charge. You're collaborating with a very complex system, which is infected with many different agendas. Are we really aware of that? I myself don't have a mobile phone. Often, especially if we have to be busy in the modern world, we get a lot of tensions. There are so many frustrations which arise due to changes in bureaucratic procedures. I think for most of us, we have to spend more and more time in administrative tasks, organizing our lives, getting the right supplier for electricity or gas, working out complicated things by ourselves on the computer, rather than having someone else to do it as you would in the old days. Now you become empowered, maybe, to do it by yourself. So I think that leads to a lot of tension in the body. So doing some movement which allows the ease and plasticity of the movement of the joints, the muscles, and so on to occur is very helpful. Because when you get impacted by the world, you get a vibration. And the vibration is increased by tension. Just as if you tighten the strings of a guitar and you pluck them, then you get a higher vibration coming out of them. So the more you relax and ease yourself, you have less reactive resonance, which is quite useful because it allows the tension of the day to come out more. If you're doing pranayama and you're doing gathering the prana into the side channels and then into the central channel and using holding techniques like kumbhaka, these are also very useful, but they are techniques, they are artificial. As the Buddha said, every beginning thing is an ending thing. What has a beginning will come to an end. So when you're young and healthy, you can do all these things a lot. You feel, yes, this is it, great breakthrough. And then you get old and tired and it doesn't work so well. Why is that? Because you had the energy of the tone system, but you have to keep toning your system, which is, I am keeping myself in good condition. And when you don't keep yourself in good condition, you come into a bad condition. So neither the good condition nor the bad condition was the natural condition. So Dzogchen is more concerned with the natural condition. Some people will be very healthy and will be drawn to doing yantra yoga and such things. Other people are not. As long as you understand the mind is not a thing, energy is dynamic and interactive and unstoppable, then however you are, if you're present with it, it's not a problem. There is no perfect way to be. You can meditate lying on the ground. People say, oh, but you have to sit straight because if the spine is aligned, of course there's a rationale in that. But when it gets turned into a rule and a regulation, if you don't do it the right way, then you will be wrong and you will get negative consequences. How do you know? How do you know? Speaking with the big voice of truth is often problematic. Each person, especially if you want to follow Dzogchen, you have to find out how you are. How is your body? What is a good diet for you? How much sleep do you need? How much study is good for you? Should you meditate for a long period of time or a short period of time? Who can tell you? Of course, anybody can tell you, but who can tell you the truth for you? Is your life, your experience. If you are so alienated from yourself, you don't know yourself, then maybe the first thing would be curious about yourself. I need to study more to find myself. Really? You study more to get knowledge and information, to pass an exam, maybe get more money. But if you want to find yourself, be with yourself. And how you do that is not thinking about yourself, but aligning yourself gently, easily, in a friendly, relaxed way to allow how you are to show itself to you. And in that way, the looker and the looked at suddenly click. Oh, two peas in a pod. Together we are the whole. This is the undivided, simple, intrinsic actuality. And there are many interesting stories about her which are related. One was that when she was young, she had these difficulties to find the freedom to practice Dharma, which was particularly difficult for women, not just because there are many predatory men around, but because women usually had a man in the family, the father, the brothers, and so on, wanting to determine their fate. And being able to give a daughter in marriage could be a way of getting some dowries into the some economic exchange system could be set up through that. So she had to struggle very hard to find freedom. And when she was away from the family and studying, she became very good at reading, and she became a kind of professional reader, particularly of the Prajnaparamita literature. So she would be paid to go to people's houses to read these holy texts that would be a blessing. And then she heard that there was a Lama giving an initiation. So she went to see him, but the monks who were there, they didn't want to let her in, thinking, you know, who is this strange woman? You haven't done all the basic practices you needed to do. But anyway, the Lama said, okay, she can come in, she can sit at the back. So he started the initiation, very nice way, with bells and drums and all kind of things going on. And halfway through, she got up and walked out. And the monks are looking at each other thinking, yeah, of course, we know, you know what women are like. At the end of the initiation, they came out and they're looking around. Oh, she must have run away. And then one looks up and he says, oh, look, she's sitting up in the tree. And the Lama comes out and he says, oh, yes, she is the only one who got the initiation. So there are many stories like that. So in one sense, she was extremely unconventional. She got the fathers of her children to look after the kids so she could go off and do more practice. One of her sons, he lived up on a glacier wearing only the very bushy tails of yaks. They were a pretty wild family. And this kind of presence is very important because it acts as a kind of counterpoint to the regulated stages of the path approach, that if you do this, then you do that, then you do that. What she points out first, look at yourself, see your own situation, and try to find, if you need a teacher, try to find a teacher who can actually see you and tune into you and not put you into the sausage grinder. You could look at the Simply Being website, which has a lot of material in it. And also I'll be doing more Zoom teaching in the autumn, and in the summer, I'll be doing a live teaching in the countryside just south of London. So that information you can get on the website. Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye. Bye-bye.